This resolution that was just vetoed restated U.S. opposition to Israel's plan to attack Rafah, a city in southern Gaza. That's where hundreds of thousands of Gazans have taken shelter. Dan Perry is with us now, former Europe, African, and Middle East editor for the Associated Press. So let's begin with the headline here. What is your level of skepticism, given the fact that it's Russia and China vetoing the U.S.'s stance for a ceasefire now?
Well, look, the Russians and Chinese called it a hypocritical spectacle that doesn't really pressure Israel. And I have to say, miscreants though they may be, I do agree with them, because the resolution called for a ceasefire in case of a hostage release. And of course, there's no debate that if there were to be a hostage release, it could only come in the context of a ceasefire. So the content of the resolution that the U.S. proposed didn't really pressure Israel. And therefore, the veto of it is not a pro-Israel thing. It's an effort to expose the game behind the American proposal, which was really simply to signal in the very fact that they proposed it without coordinating with Netanyahu, that they are sick and tired of his prevarications and stalling tactics and general games in the conduct of this war. I do think the U.S. supports the ultimate aim of the war, which is to remove Hamas from power in Gaza, but the way Netanyahu is going about it is obviously problematic from a U.S. perspective. And of course, because of the nature of Netanyahu, a criminal defendant on trial for bribery, whose government is controlled by the extreme right in Israel, every utterance and every action that Israel does in the context of its, from a U.S. perspective, just prosecution of the war is somehow suspect of being part of Netanyahu's political machination.
Does the United States, in having this latest action from Russia and China, have diminished strength in the negotiations? How does this muddy where we go next?
I kind of think it does, because the U.S. tried to make a point that they're going to pass a seemingly, falsely, but seemingly anti-Israel resolution at the UN, and the Russians and the Chinese called their bluff. But at the end of the day, the fact remains that Israel needs the U.S. for spare parts and for an umbrella to win against a legitimately anti-Israel resolution that could come, indeed from Russia or China. And so I don't think the U.S. can keep supporting Israel with Israel constantly saying no to everything they propose. And at the end of the day, what we're really talking about here, I think, is not a U.S. opposition Israel going into Rafah, which is sort of Hamas's last stand. I think the U.S. does want that, but they wants it to be done in a certain context of a greater plan that the U.S. is promoting with the Europeans and with moderate Arabs that would involve the Palestinian Authority returning to Gaza, which Israel itself used to want, and a two-state solution discussion, which Netanyahu himself agreed to 4 years ago under Trump, in the context of a bigger regional realignment, where Saudi Arabia normalizes Israel, and the result is a U.S.-backed strategic umbrella of Israel and moderate Arabs against Iran. All this is good for Israel. It has support in the Israeli security establishment. It has support, really, among the Israeli people. Netanyahu is standing in the way, and that is the source of the current conflict between the Biden administration and Netanyahu, and that's why we're seeing these machinations at the UN. Is more the word for it, and Russia and China kind of called the U.S. bluff in this case. But I suspect that real pressure of a different kind actually is coming rather soon.
As we watch this is a member from Israel speaking right now. How binding is any decision coming out of this, right? Because the ceasefire talks, we've been covering them for weeks. Do we not? What comes of this, do you believe, with the Rafah offensive likely planned in the next several weeks?
Well, how binding would an actual resolution that passed would be? It depends on what the sanctions would be in that resolution. The UN Security Council is one of the few bodies that exist in international jurisprudence whose decisions have the force of international law, fuzzy though international law be. If the UN Security Council resolution is violated by Israel, the result could be anything from military intervention to economic boycotts. But really, it's a political statement. The U.S. is telling Israel to get in line, and I assess Netanyahu's time is running out. I wouldn't be too surprised to see him becoming a little bit more pliant in the weeks and months ahead, because he cannot continue without U.S. support, much though he may bluster to the contrary. And Biden, for his electoral reasons in 2024, really needs this war to end.
Right. A lot at stake here for all involved. Dan, a significant development. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Still ahead, the latest criminal investigation into Boeing after